cloudy start to the day for many of us, but there will be a lot of sunshine developing towards Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, Wales, and of course Southern England as well. It's across the Midlands and Eastern England where the calm will be more starting to clear away, but eventually across the Midlands there will be some sun spells coming through. It's just around Lincolnshire, parts of East Anglia, that we'll probably see some cloud lingering on into the afternoon, and it's here temperatures will probably be kind of pegged back at about 14-15 degrees Celsius, but elsewhere we've got the sunshine. We'll see temperatures today getting up into the high teens to low 20s, and UV levels today will be high as well, so lots of fine sunny and warm weather for many of us today. Things changing slightly on Sunday. We'll see some rain moving its way into Scotland and Northern Ireland, pushing its way southeastward. A cooler day across northern and western areas, but down to the southeast, sunny spells and temperatures again getting up to around about the high teens to low 20s. Simon King, 5 Live Weather.
BBC Radio 5 Live, the voice of the UK. Saturday breakfasts, Chris Warburton and Eleanor Oldroyd.
Listen live, pause, rewind and discover with the BBC Sounds app.
So we'll be back in Liverpool shortly, where of course the UK are hosting Eurovision on behalf of Ukraine. Ukraine unable to stage the competition there this year, despite winning it last year for obvious reasons really. The conflict's still ongoing. Ukraine says it's recaptured ground in the eastern city of Bakhmut, which has been the site of months of fighting. Kiev said its forces have advanced just over a mile this week. Russia said its troops had regrouped in one area. The BBC's Ukraine correspondent Hugo Vachega is in Kiev this morning. Hugo, good morning to you. Just give us an idea of the significance of these gains for Ukraine.
Yeah, it's quite significant because it would mark the most significant advance by Ukrainian forces in months of fighting near Bakhmut. We've been talking about Bakhmut for a very long time. This has been a key target of Russian forces in the east of the country. So the Ukrainians are saying that they've made some gains, and I think what is interesting here is that the Russian authorities issued a statement yesterday, and they acknowledged that there have been some gains by Ukrainian forces, and they also said that some Russian troops had to essentially abandon some positions. They said that these troops will move to more favorable positions. So it seems that there has been an increase in terms of military activity around Bakhmut in the last week or so. And yesterday I spoke with a commander, Ukrainian commander in Bakhmut. He confirmed to me that Ukrainian forces had made some gains, but he said that fighting in Bakhmut continues, that the situation remains extremely difficult in the city. But I think the strategy of the Ukrainians here has been to keep the Russians engaged in this war of attrition in Bakhmut. They are defending the city, and this strategy is because the Ukrainians are preparing this much anticipated counter-offensive. So it seems that part of the strategy here is to inflict as many heavy losses on the Russian side before the Ukrainians go ahead with this counter-offensive. And obviously I interviewed President Zelensky earlier this week, and he told me that the country still needed more time before it could launch this counter-offensive. The military was still waiting for equipment that had been promised by Western countries to arrive, so it still needed more time before it could go ahead with this counter-offensive.
And where do you think they are going to be able to launch the counter-offensive? Will it be to try and regain ground that has been lost to Russia so far? What's the I'm not asking you to be a military strategist to try and give away any secrets that you might have gleaned, but where is this likely to happen, do you think?
It's much easier. I printed out because my phone is over there.
It's fine. I think just few people know what the plan is. Obviously, this is a secret. The Ukrainians in the last few weeks have tried to manage expectations. I think they know that there is a lot of pressure, perhaps, on Ukrainians to achieve major gains. They've received weapons and military equipment from Western countries, and I think they now want to show Western allies that these military support can translate into major gains on the battlefield. So you have positions in the east of the country where pro-Russian separatists have been fighting for a very long time, and then you have those regions in the south, especially the regions of Kherson and Zaporizhia, which have been under occupation since early last year, since the very early days of the war. So there has been some speculation that perhaps the Ukrainian military would try to attack Russian positions in that part of the country. But I think the question, it's fair to say that nobody really knows what is going to happen.
Morning.
Obviously, the Ukrainians want to surprise Russian forces with this counter-offensive. We know that Russian troops have fortified some of their positions along the front line.
Individual.
And there is anxiety even here in Ukraine ahead of this counter-offensive.
Right.
And again, I've been talking to some officials here, and they've been saying that, look, we know that we need to succeed, but again, this counter-offensive should not be seen as the silver bullet in this war.
Very quickly, Hugo, you're going to be watching Eurovision tonight? Friends in Kiev going to be watching?
We are going to be watching Eurovision with some Ukrainians to get some reaction from Ukrainians here to the contest. Obviously, Ukraine was supposed to be hosting the event, but it has been unable to do so because of the war. And it's interesting because I asked President Zelensky whether he was frustrated that his country was unable to host Eurovision, and he said, look, what is frustrating is that people are still being killed in this country. So I think this is perhaps an indication of how many Ukrainians are feeling here as Eurovision takes place later today in Liverpool.
Thank you very much, Hugo. Hugo Bachega, who's our correspondent in Kiev. It is happening. It is happening in Liverpool, and you need a bit of perspective, Chris, don't you? Really, that's the thing. It's we need fun in our lives as well, but it's a really serious reason why it's
you have to remember, don't you, exactly why we are seeing all these Ukrainian flags on the streets of Liverpool, and the responsibility that this city has taken very, very seriously, and this country's taken very, very seriously as well, to hold this contest on behalf of Ukraine. And we've been getting the thoughts of wonderful Aliona this morning, who is just looking resplendent in her headdress of yellow and blue flowers. Looks absolutely magnificent. We've been playing music. We've heard from the British entry, of course. I saw May Muller performing. We heard her earlier on, and we've heard from, who have we heard from? We've heard the Austrian entry, we've heard the Finnish entry, we've had the Norwegian entry, some of the favourites there. I'm going to play you a track from a few years ago. This was the UK entry in 2018. Okay.
Mode off.
And League Two?
There was in the first 6 weeks.
Yes.
We couldn't get a win to save our lives, but I think there's a big difference between going from the top of the National League to the top of League Two, without sounding sort of disrespectful anyway to the National League. It's really, really strong. There's almost a split in that division where there are teams that have got big infrastructures, or ex-football league clubs have got big budgets, and there are some part-time teams in there that being in that league is a huge coup for them, and staying in there is important. So there are some games where you do become real favourites, whereas I think in League Two, especially this year, it's been really, really close. So much so that, especially sort of 2 months to go, the playoff places were up for grabs, probably between 13 or so teams, and it's taken it down to the last day to see who finishes in there. So there's no gimmies, and it has been a significant difference in terms of wanting to finish right up the top end.
Is there, when you were in the National League, were you always there to be shot at wherever you went, bar, I don't know, the games against Chesterfield, Wrexham or Notts County, for example, whereas does some of the pressure come off a little bit in League Two?
I suppose it does.